Okay, we're live. So, I don't know. Some people might be joining us for the second time today. This is a behind the scenes live recording session. AV Rant, now episode 678. Because, that's how numbers work. So you're being warned, this is the behind the scenes version. Yet again, you're just seeing things as they go out live. There might be
we should call
technical
it
glitches.
X677.
Huh?
Like Emotiva does.
Oh,
Just
yes.
add an X to the front of our 677 episode. This will be the better one.
Or at the end, 677X.
Little I 677X.
That's right.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant again. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Yes, we are.
How the heck are we going to post these things? That's the real question.
Oh,
that's what I really want.
Well, the numbers still go up sequentially. Yes, this is episode 678. We just recorded episode 677 like half an hour ago. We're doing two in 1 week because we got to catch up after the holidays. I never even asked last time because we had so much news and questions to cover. How was Christmas? How was New Year's? That good, huh? Oh, I shouldn't have asked.
Don't have kids. No, I love my children, but boy, they could suck the fun out of a
Oh dear.
ride at Disneyland. It was okay.
Okay.
So our Christmas this year with my wife and I, my plan, since this was my idea, my plan was that we were going to take and give them, they would unwrap or they would receive suitcases.
Yes.
And then they'd open their suitcase and inside there'd be clothes. And then I would say, put them in the car, we're leaving. And then we would drive and we would go on a trip.
Yes.
And the trip was supposed to be to, well, initially my brother-in-law, my wife's brother and his family were going up to Canada someplace to go skiing for a week. And I'm like, kids have never been skiing. I come from a place where there were mountains within 2 hours. So, we never planned, we said, hey, we might go skiing this weekend. We'll see what the weather's like on Friday.
Sure.
I don't schedule 3 months out that I'm going to go for a week-long skiing trip. And then there's a blizzard or there's no snow or there's whatever. Yeah, and then my kids have never been skiing. My wife skied once 30 years ago. So I'm like, I don't know if I would have spent the kind of money we're going to have to spend to get up to Canada to do all this stuff with your brother who has more money than we do. So we did that. We kind of did that. We gave them suitcases, and inside the suitcases there were thermals and gloves and hats, which kind of told them they were going someplace cold. And we said to go pack your bags. And because there was some family in town, we ended up leaving the next day.
Okay.
So we left the next day. We drove up to Asheville, North Carolina. We did some rock climbing outside, which was great. We did some hiking, which was muddy and kind of sucked. And we did 1 day of skiing, which, I mean, by my standards was terrible, but by everybody else's standards was fine.
All right.
They were making snow. And if you've ever been someplace where they're making snow,
I have not.
they blow it. They blow it. I've never been there either. They blow it onto where you're skiing.
Sure.
So you're skiing through, basically flying ice at your face. And then your goggles, your glasses, whatever you have,
Snow
all
is
gets
frozen
completely
water.
covered. Yes. And you cannot see anything. So it gets quite dangerous. And it was super packed. But overall, it was a very good trip.
All right.
It was a very good trip. So, yes. I didn't make it to Canada, but I put the bug in my wife's ear that I'm going to try to get her to go to Canada near you.
I see.
We'll see, to go skiing or something. Well, we'll see. So this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. We're not going to have listeners of the week except for Andrew, who's making a model for, what's his name? Toasted Toast? Turn Toast?
Turn Toast was one of our Patreon supporters whose name was drawn. And as soon as we get those two in touch, he'll be getting a model. I'll reach over and get the model that Andrew sent to me. There we go.
You got yours first. How does he get it all the way up to Canada first? Maybe he's from Canada.
He is in Canada.
Well, there you go. What did you deliver it to you?
It came via the postal service. Yes, he sent me a TIE fighter. You cannot see it if you're listening to the audio-only version, but it's a lovely, detailed model of a TIE fighter, and I love it, and it's going to go in my theater.
And if you want to hear our listeners of this week, go to the last podcast because we're going to go straight to the questions because we got a lot of them
Yes,
and we're
we
trying to
are.
get through as we can. So, starting right off with Carlos. So, Carlos has two SVS SB16 Ultra subwoofers.
He's nice.
You can feel him from here. Yeah, he put one in his front right corner and the other in his rear left corner. Good placement. He ran Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT. It set the sub in his front corner to 13 feet and the sub in his back corner to 22 feet. Neither of those distances matched the physical distances from his main seat. We've talked about this before, but we'll talk about it again. He tried flipping the sub in the rear corner between 0 and 180 degrees. With it set to 180, the base seems slightly fuller, but it's not a large difference either way. The forums say to set both subs to 0 degrees. What should he do? Yes. You should set. Well, first of all, how did you have them plugged in? He's clearly got them. He's clearly got them both plugged in.
Yes, he is clearly using both subwoofer outputs, subwoofer output 1 and 2 from his AV receiver. It's clearly a Denon Marantz since he has Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT. And
let's talk about distances. First of all, distance from your speaker is almost always a physical distance. It's the distance between the microphone and your speaker. That's almost always the case. In subwoofers, that is not the case. I know. Weird. It took us a while to figure this out. But what it is a delay.
Yeah.
It is a delay. We are delaying the bass coming out by that number of feet, basically, if you think of it that way. And we're doing that because of how the room interacts with the bass.
Yeah, well, sound travels approximately 1 foot every millisecond. Yeah. So if you're talking about what is the distance, you could also translate that roughly into milliseconds. And that would be about equivalent. So that's why it's more or less the same effect as setting a delay.
Right. So what your Denon or Marantz receiver has done is said that, to phase align all the speakers and the subwoofers so that when the sound is played out of one, it is played by all of them at the same time. It delays the subwoofers by those amounts. Okay. So what you really want is you want the think of your two subwoofers and your room as one speaker.
Yes.
Your two subwoofers.
In fact, no matter how many subwoofers you have in one room, and your room is wherever the air can freely move. So we don't know for sure that he's in an enclosed rectangle.
Right.
Maybe he's in a wide open family room. The room is everywhere that the air can easily move.
Right. So that is all one speaker. So what you really want, or one driver, or one box, or whatever.
One sound-producing thing.
You want the two subwoofers to be playing at exactly the same time, no delay between the two of them, exactly at the same time, in the same phase. So when the driver goes out on one, you want the driver to go on the other one, and vice versa. This is why instead of using the dual subwoofer outputs on my Denon, honestly, in my room, it didn't make almost any difference because the room itself, the subwoofers are physically the distances that were set were almost identical.
Sure.
Anyways, so I think it was a half-foot difference or something.
Yeah.
But what I've done is set them both with a Y splitter out of one of those jacks.
Told your
my
AV receiver you have one subwoofer. Even though physically you have two, you've told it you have one, used a Y splitter. So Carlos, I will refer you once again to my 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers that I've written as an article over on AVRant.com. We'll have the guide for it in the show notes for this very episode if you're checking on YouTube or looking at AVRant.com, and check the show notes for this episode 678. So I go through the whole process of how to set up dual subwoofers using just one subwoofer output. And if you're saying, well, why can't I just manually go in and change the distances to be the same? Still using sub EQ HT, it's because unfortunately when you ran Odyssey, it first set those distances, or first set those delays, if you want to think of it that way, and then equalized the result after having done that. And so if you then manually go back in and set both of the distance settings for the two subwoofers to be the same, the equalization is no longer going to apply to those settings. You're going to have different wave interactions that would have to be equalized differently. So we actually want to just use one subwoofer output, a Y splitter feeding the very same signal to both subs, and have Multi-Q XT32 equalize that. and there's
Right.
no real way to get around it other than following the 12-step guide and having just one subwoofer output. So
You won't need all 12 of those steps, by the way. I don't think. Right.
probably not in your room. Yeah, in your room, you'll probably just need the first 4.
If it's a rectangle, you
If it's a
just need the
rectangle.
first couple. Yeah. Bob got a 65-inch Sony X900F TV over Christmas, and he is truly impressed with almost all content. But he's noticed that if he watches Dolby Vision content from its built-in apps, the image looks very dark. And he's read online that even though it's Dolby Vision, it actually is darker than it's supposed to be. If he uses the same streaming apps on his 2017 NVIDIA Shield, which does not support Dolby Vision, he gets HDR10, and it looks great. Think you've solved your problem. So can we explain to him why Dolby Vision content looks so dark when he's using the TV's built-in apps? Would Dolby Vision look just as dark on his TV if he has an external Dolby Vision source such as the new NVIDIA Shield? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
So this is a known issue with some of the Sonys. It's as far as I know, it's not every single Sony model out there, but this is a known issue with Sony televisions where for some reason the way Dolby Vision ends up showing up is too dark. It is darker than it should be. You can have the exact same Dolby Vision source playing on 2 different TVs, say one of these Sonys and an LG, for example, and the LG will just look brighter overall, even though they're getting the exact same Dolby Vision signal. So it is a known issue. That supposedly there's a firmware patch in the works, but this has been months and months now, and it hasn't happened yet. So I'm not exactly sure what the situation is there.
They probably subcontracted through Microsoft's audio division to get this
maybe
patch
they farmed
done.
it out to Emotiva, and then it'll be years from now.
It's right in line behind the Drac update at Emotiva and the getting audio out of the right channel and Bitstream out for the Xbox One.
Right now, very problematically for explaining, if we're going to explain this in full, if you're looking at most external sources like say an Apple TV 4K or the new NVIDIA Shield that can output Dolby Vision, most of those they're feeding within the video range, and the video range is not every single code value. There are 1,024 code values between absolute black and absolute white in the signal, and it takes off, let's see, 16 times 4 is what's taken off the bottom, and 16 times 20 is what's taken off at the top, and those are the below black and above white ranges, and you're only looking at what's in between. And most of the external devices, when it's Dolby Vision, certainly in the case of the Apple TV 4K, it's only sending that limited range. It's not sending the below black and the above white. And unfortunately, what the Sonys seem to be doing is acting as though black should be all the way down at code value 0 instead of at the video black level. So that's why everything is like crushed way down.
Oh, it's all shifted.
Yeah, everything has been shifted down as though it's way down at code value 0. So something like an Oppo, where you can actually go in and choose where the black level is, even for Dolby Vision content coming out.
You mean the Oppo they don't make anymore?
The Oppo they don't make anymore. That was like the one player where you could kind of fix this manually on Sony TVs, but that was about it. So unless you have an Oppo, and that would only be in the case of playing discs, it's always going to look this way until Sony issues that firmware patch.
Well, and there's your solution. Just use other apps that don't have Dolby Vision.
Yeah, well, I mean, use the HDR10.
Yeah,
you got an NVIDIA Shield. It's a great external streaming box. Use that.
Just wait until the firmware update comes out. Brett has his theater set up in a multi-use room that is open to the rest of the house. He has 2 SB13 Ultra subs and a Marantz SR6011 receiver. Previously, he had run Odyssey Multi-Q XC32 and used the 2 subwoofer outputs, which gave him different distance and level settings for his 2 subs. But then you heard us talking, I guess, seconds ago, about sending only 1 subwoofer signal in Rob's 12-step guide. Wow. This is like on the fly feedback.
It's on brand.
There you go. So he decided to give that a try. Rob says in his guide to set each sub so that it reads 72 dB individually, and then when they play together, they should read 75. But in this case, that didn't happen. Playing together, they still read 72, so maybe up to 72.5. Can we explain? Well, I mean, it depends on how you were measuring the subs, I guess. I mean, what device did you use to level match them to begin with, and
Well, I'm
then
pretty
you're
sure he
now.
said he used a UMic 1, so that's a very
Oh
accurate
well, that
microphone.
should be accurate. So then the next one would be if we. Well, I don't know if he played them together. Did he play them together and then measure them with the UMic 1, or did he measure them with uh, the
I,
Odyssey mic? Either
I
way,
don't think
if it's open to the rest of the house, I
that's the
mean,
thing.
that's really what your issue is. For most other people, if it was a normal sized room and it was all enclosed, I would say there could be differences in the mics. So, they use the U mic and then you went to the Odyssey mic. The Odyssey mic maybe isn't as accurate, and 3dB, while egregiously inaccurate, is not beyond the realm of possibility. So whatever. But if you have a room that's open to the rest of the house, yeah, those subs aren't getting anywhere near pressurizing that space,
That's
which
just it. Yeah, it's more a matter of you are not getting probably much, if any, room gain.
Yeah.
You're not getting the reinforcement of this sound bouncing back and forth between 6 surfaces, like you would have in an enclosed rectangle of a room. This is a wide open space, and I don't know, maybe this is going up to a loft like some people's things do in that. I mean, you're really getting very little room gain, and you're getting very little coupling of the two subs as though they're acting as one, even though they're both within this same designated area. It's in this wide open space. So this is similar to if you took 2 subs to the great outdoors and you did not stack them or put them directly side by side, then you wouldn't expect a large increase in decibel level by having them both play together. Maybe it reads 72.5 or 73 or something, and that is not unusual if you have a really wide open space. That's really what's doing that.
Right. So in your case, you would just basically set them both to 75.
In your case, you can set them both to 75 and it'll work just fine.
Rob needs to adjust your guide.
I tried to keep it concise.
I know. Oh, duh.
I really did. You haven't even looked at my guide. It's quite concise. It's nice.
I'm sure. He played the bass sweep on repeat, sat in each seat, and adjusted the phase knob of his closest sub, all as instructed by Rob. But he isn't confident in the accuracy of his ears. He found some phase settings where it was very obviously worse uniformity from seat to seat, but it wasn't easy at all to find the best uniformity most of the time. It sounded roughly the same, moving the phase knob little by little. Should he bust out his U-mic and a Rumikyu wizard so that he can see the response instead of just relying on his human ears? I mean, yeah. Sure, why not?
So, I mean, if it's going to bother you that you don't find the very best, then you're going to have to.
That's how to do it.
You're going to have to measure and look at the graphs. But again,
I think you're going to drive yourself absolutely crazy. I mean, you're going to be like, oh no, this line's wavy in different ways than this one's wavy. Is that good or bad? I don't know.
Well, you're looking for the same wavy from seat to seat. That's the uniformity. Right. But again, being in a wide open room, it makes it less likely that you're going to have a lot of bad interactions. And I mean, first of all, you have confirmed that, yes, adjusting the phase knob of one of the subs does make a difference, because you heard some examples for your own ears and just your ears where it was like, oh, that is clearly much worse from seat to seat.
Right.
But the majority of the time, it's about the same from seat to seat. That's a good thing. It means that you are not in a situation where you only have one good phase setting and then nothing else will work. The chances are, even if you did the measurements, most of them are going to look quite uniform from seat to seat. That's great. As long as you're getting pretty good uniformity from seat to seat, you can go ahead and equalize, confident that Odyssey will be able to say, well, all the seats go down and all the seats go up in roughly the same place, maybe not by exactly the same amount in every seat, but they're roughly going up and down at the same frequency, so I can equalize that. That's really all we're after.
So what you're discovering is something that most people don't ever take the time or effort to try to figure out, which is, how are things acting in my room right now? And that makes, we can't, it would be great if we could extrapolate from your open room to everybody else's open room and say, yeah, your uniformity will probably be okay because,
well, we don't even know exactly where his subs are placed in this open room. Because again, going back to that, why didn't them playing together have more of an increase in sound? I mean, if neither of them is up against a boundary, that's going to be a factor too. Putting a sub in a corner gives you like a 9 decibel boost. Well, if this is out in open space or they're on either side of his couch, I don't know, could be. You're not going to get that gain either.
even once if you put a sub in an enclosed room, these interactions between the walls in the room
Yeah.
and the sound that's going on becomes extremely dramatic. I mean,
Yes.
it's not a subtle thing.
Yeah.
Uh, in my room when I lived in Jacksonville, I had openings on to either side, and those wrapped around the house to the kitchen, to the
Mm-hmm.
living room, down the hall, to the bedrooms, and everything else. And I had some just terrible interactions in that room. My subs were, placed. I think I don't remember front left, front right. I think I only had one sub for when I was there. So I had those subs, that sub not just placed in the place that it could be, and I just had to kind of deal with it. But you now know that throughout all these different settings of the face, just get to one that sounds pretty uniform to you
Mm-hmm.
and stick with it. That's what I would do.
Yep.
He says after going through Rob's whole procedure, his bass now sounds a little better, but it's not a major improvement versus what Odyssey did when it set the two subs instead of one. Will measuring with Room EQ Wizard make a bigger difference? Nope. Your
Yeah.
big issue is the openness of the space, and you are fortunate in that you're having fewer uniformity problems
Mm-hmm.
than most people experience. Therefore, Odyssey, just by it doing its thing, was fine.
Yeah.
It was fine.
Yeah, I mean,
So
chances are, given this wide open space, you probably have fewer nulls to begin with. I mean, null is
yeah,
what we're really worried about because that
that's the bad one.
EQ can't fix a null. But you probably have fewer to begin with because you don't have six parallels, three sets of parallel surfaces like you have in an enclosed rectangle. So you're not dealing with that. You probably have fewer problems to begin with. If you actually did this procedure and said that does sound a little better, and I don't know, maybe he's just trying to convince himself that it does, or maybe it really does noticeably sound a little better. I'm like, well, that's actually significant in this setting if it actually does sound a little better, because Odyssey does a pretty decent job. Multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT, it does a pretty decent job. It's not terrible. We're just saying we think this procedure works even better, and you're like, yeah, it worked a little better. And that's about as good as it gets.
So playing that bass sweep over and over and over revealed that his windows, some of which are over 100 years old, can rattle.
Mm.
Anything can rattle if you try hard enough. They almost never rattle during actual movies, though. He discovered other rattles in his house, too, and he used museum putty to reduce those, but he couldn't seem to do anything for his windows. Any ideas? New windows, I think, is pretty much it. I don't think you can really do much. I mean, it depends on how they're rattling. I mean, if they're rattling up
Yeah.
and down, you could put something. You could put something at the bottom, or I'm just assuming they open up and down. You could put something there, but likely they're just the glass is vibrating inside the frame. In which case, no.
I mean, all I
don't really
did
see.
with my window, or a couple of windows when I was, back at my parents' house years and years ago, that would rattle, and here in my apartment I had a window that rattled, and all I did was actually like fold up a piece of paper until it was about the thickness of the little gap in the window frame,
Right.
and
Yeah.
put a little bit of foam on either side there, and just kind of wedge that in there, and that was
Yeah.
about as good as I could do for reducing the rattle of the window without doing something like replacing the window.
Right. Tony has a Denon X3400H and two SVS subs, one PB12 NSD and one older 1646 CS Plus cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
Below that naming convention from before.
That's going back.
So the 16 is a 16-inch driver, if I remember correctly.
No, it's a
46 is how
16-inch
tall it was.
diameter of the cylinder, and 46 was
40
the inches high. Yeah.
high, right? So whatever. He has SVS, and they said that in terms of output and extension, those two models are actually quite close, so they should have no problems working together as dual subs. He's run multi-Q XT32 and sub EQHT, and while he likes overall sound quality, he wanted a bit more thump in the chest. He measured with Room EQ Wizard, and it revealed that he does have a bit of a dip right around 40 hertz, not a full-on null, but a visible dip right where we said that thump in you in the chest region should be. So he'd like to try Rob's 12. Let's see what's going on. So I'm glad I stopped it when I stopped at the last one. They're all the same thing. So you'd like to try Rob's 12-step guide to see if you can get some better results. Did you change the questions around
I
while we
absolutely
took
did
the
not.
break?
This is legitimately the order in which they came in. What happens, man? Themes for some reason.
So he wants to try your guide to see if he can get some better results, but there's a chance he will want to return what he already has right now. So he'd like to be able to save and reload his current settings. He knows the Odyssey editor app will allow him to do this, but if he's going to spend any money, he'd like to get a bit more out of it than just the ability to save and load Odyssey settings. So the main thing that seems to be that you can manually alter the curves, right? But how and why would he want to do that? He's concerned that if he just plays around with that, he might make things worse. Can we justify the $20 app purchase for him? First of all, it's $20, dude. Settle down.
It's $20.
But second, the 2 subs that you have, if you return those subs and buy other subs, be prepared to be disappointed.
Oh, he's not talking about
results.
returning the subs. He's talking about...
Yeah, he is.
No, he's talking about returning to the settings he already has. That's what he's like.
That's what he's talking
he did the automatic thing with sub EQHT, which has done dual independent subwoofer, trim levels and distances, like we've just been talking about with the previous 2 questions. Yeah. So he did that. He's like, the results are pretty good, but he notices this one dip right around 40 hertz. So he wants to try the mono subwoofer output, but if he doesn't like the results of the 12-step procedure, he wants to make sure he can at least get back to what he already has today.
Well, he just run Odyssey again. I mean, I hate to
you
break
could
it to
just run Odyssey again.
You would just run Odyssey again, because even if you get the Odyssey editor app, even if you go buy it right now, I don't know how it works for everybody else, but when I loaded it up, I wasn't able to go into my den and save what was currently there. I had to rerun Odyssey.
Oh, you should be able to save if you have the Odyssey editor
I wasn't.
app.
I wasn't.
That is one of the features. You are supposed to be able to save and load the configuration that
I
you had
wasn't
saved.
able to load it from my receiver. I couldn't. It didn't go. I mean, maybe I did something wrong, or maybe I don't know, but it wasn't accessing it. So I ended up having to rerun Odyssey in order to get that. And
I see.
I mean, you're talking about rerunning Odyssey. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, it's some time, but it's not difficult. It walks you through it. But no, I mean, what else can this Odyssey editor app do? So, I mean, first of all, when you're playing,
it's got that notch you can take out.
Yeah,
right?
you can take out the 2 kilohertz notch that they put in there. You can also just say, hey, don't equalize anything above 500 hertz, which is what a lot of people like to do, or even 250 hertz, which is probably the transition frequency of your room. So sometimes people just say, yeah, don't equalize the mid-range and the treble at all. Just equalize the bass. That's something people want to do. If you're playing around with the target curve, remember that is just the target curve. That is what it's going to now attempt to have the frequency response of your speaker or your subwoofers match that new target curve. And it's going to do the best that it can, but it's not going to be able to match it exactly. So there's not really much you can do that could seriously harm the setup. I mean, you just turn it off if you don't like the results and try it again. So it's more if you want to play around with it. I think Tony was the fellow who was a little bit concerned because the reviews on, say, the App Store are 3 stars or something like that. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people who don't understand what they're doing. There's a lot of people who don't understand. There were a ton of people who gave it a 1-star review because they already owned a Denon and Marantz and it wasn't one of the models that works with the app. So they're like, how come it doesn't work with the app? It's like, well, if you read even a little bit of the description, which lists all the compatible models. So a ton of the 1-star reviews were people complaining that it doesn't work with their receiver. I saw reviews where they're like, how come this doesn't work with my Yamaha? I'm like, well, that's just your problem, isn't it?
Because you're dumb. That's why. Did you try harder?
If there are people doing that and leaving 1-star, it's going to drag the average down, isn't it? Unfortunately. So no, it's $20. I think it's a good thing to have and play around with. And yeah, there you go.
Herb M. Herb got a 65-inch C9 OLED, and he couldn't be happier with its picture quality. He replaced a 55-inch TCL. The sources he uses most are his Xbox One X and the Apple TV 4K. He has them plugged into his Denon X4400H, but he keeps all of his gear in a separate location from his TV, so he's using a 45-foot HDMI cable that was installed back in 2012. Beginning to see the problem here. As we might have guessed, HDR and Dolby Vision are not making it to his new OLED, so he tried plugging his Xbox directly into the TV, and that got HDR, Dolby Vision, and auto game mode all working. And he was hoping that since his new TV and his X4400H both say they support eARC, they would be able to send Atmos back to his Denon through his existing 45-foot HDMI cable, but that didn't work. No, that doesn't work. You need a special cable to do audio return channel.
Usually. For eARC, so I mean, we may as well address that right now, because for eARC, and in the case of an Xbox One X, sending its Atmos back, so you've plugged it directly into your TV, and now the TV is going to use its eARC port to send that type of Atmos, which could be full lossless Atmos, like if you're using your Xbox One X to play a physical Blu-ray or a physical Ultra HD Blu-ray. That's full lossless Atmos. That cannot be carried by regular ARC. It can be carried by eARC, but eARC requires the Ethernet part of HDMI. It has to be HDMI with Ethernet for eARC to work, and I'm betting from back in 2012, it was not an HDMI cable with Ethernet. That is likely the issue for that particular thing.
So you already explained all
that.
That's the answers to the question. That's the whole question.
I mean, basically, yeah. So if you were to plug your Apple TV 4K directly into the TV and try to use ARC to go from the TV back to the AV receiver, that should work, because that is the Dolby Digital Plus lossy version of Dolby Atmos, which
and that should go over ARC.
Be able to go back through regular ARC, not eARC. But if you want to do both of your sources, and that's what he wants to do, then you have to consider what the Xbox One does. And the only way that would work is you could put both of your sources below your TV, plug them straight into your TV, but get a new HDMI cable, one that is with Ethernet, to send the thing back through eARC. But if you're going to get the new HDMI cable anyway, then you might as well keep your sources where you want them, which is by your AV receiver, and you're getting a new HDMI cable anyway. So, yeah, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
45 foot, you're going to get that mono price, Red Mirror one?
Well, it's not Red Mirror anymore. It's Dynamic View. You could go with mono price Dynamic View. I would kind of point you to Blue Jeans Cable. I just trust them sort of implicitly when it comes to this. They have their,
because you're butting right up against that 50-foot like hard.
You really are. So
limits.
Blue Jeans Cable, it's their Series 3A, A standing for active, and it's $85 for a 50-foot. They don't have a 45. They have a 40 or a 50. So you obviously get the 50. $85 is not that bad from Blue Jeans Cable, who's often a little bit more expensive than that. I just trust them implicitly. But yeah, the mono price Dynamic View should also work. It should.
Jay had been using his L-shaped basement with a 5.1 setup and a Sony projector for several years, but now they're renovating. So there was what was there was all torn down. He's constructed and enclosed in a rectangular room, 12 feet 7 inches wide, 23 feet long, and 7.5 feet high.
So I'm showing some before photos if you're looking at YouTube. He had the opening on the right-hand side towards the rear of his room at the time, but now he has deconstructed it all down to the studs.
Yes, okay. So when the room was L-shaped, the screen had to go below a soffit. Now that's an enclosed rectangle, so you can rotate the orientation 180 degrees. So the soffit is at the back now, and he gets a full ceiling height for a screen wall at the front. Okay, so he turns around. Yep. He wants the soundproofing situation to be well muffled, not necessarily dead silent. So he followed our previous advice about wall construction and went for a decoupled ceiling with 2 layers of drywall, since reducing sound from going upstairs is the main concern. New wiring has to be run with dedicated circuits, and the plan is to go with the 7.2.4 configuration and 2 rows of seats. I have an itch. Oh, yeah, baby, that's good stuff. He wants to finalize the receptacle placement for his dual subwoofers. He had a single sub before, plus the built-in powered bass drivers of his Golden Ear Triton 2 Plus towers, which means he still only had 1 sub. He's drawn to the new PC 2000 Pro cylinders, but the room is a little narrow, so his front towers are already close to the front corners, making diagonally opposite corners a no-go. So what placement of dual subs do we think will be best? Okay, so just remember that we're looking for a mirrored placement. Yeah. My subs are not in the corners.
Right.
Okay. Because I have it could be in the corner. I was actually just looking at it just now. I could put it in the corner, but I would have to run the cable over a doorway. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do that. So, I could, but it doesn't really matter. I put on the other side of a door for my ease. I put it on the other side of this door. And then the other one is in sheeted in as close to the screen as I can possibly get it. So that basically we're about 4 or 5 feet in from the right wall, mm-hmm. and 4 or 5 feet in from the left wall. Front and back of the room.
Sure.
And that's mirrored placement. So
yeah, just imagine that if you drew a straight line from subwoofer 1 to subwoofer 2, that line would always go through the very center of your room. So right. If you imagine it that way.
Yeah. So what you want, so if you can't place it exactly where where we say in the corners, or whatever, well, cheat it in and then cheat the other one in, or cheat it forward and cheat the other one forward.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
can
I'm
put
betting
them
that
wherever.
like the exact midpoint of the two side walls probably a no-go, with it only
No-go
being
as
12
well,
feet
yeah.
7 inches wide. I mean, I'm sure he's got,
Yeah.
we can see he's got 3 seats going across. So yeah, even if the, cylinder sub standing up, where like in between your two rows of seats, are going to kind of have to shimmy around it to get to the rear row or something like that.
Yeah.
Now he was in his email, I didn't fully write this down, but he was like, he doesn't think there's a way he could put a cylinder sub at the front of his room. And like, well, they can lie on their side. There's absolutely
Yeah,
no
I was thinking
reason
the same thing. Yeah.
why a cylinder sub can't go on its side. And it might be the case, since your screen is no longer going below a soffit, that you have just enough height to lay a cylinder on its side. It goes in the middle of your front wall below your center speaker. Now, obviously, being a cylinder, you're not actually going to sit your center speaker on your cylinder sub like you might do a box. But there could be a way to do the middle of your front wall, middle of your back wall. It's just you lay the subwoofer down instead of having it stand up. But I mean, Tom's absolutely right. You move one, you pick the left side of your wall at the left side wall at the front of your room. It's 4 or 5 feet from the actual front wall. Now the second sub goes on the right side wall at the back of your room, 4 or 5 feet matching, from the back wall. And that'll work.
I mean, and I love cylinder subs as much as the next guy, but if you end up saying, "Oh, I could put it midpoint in," or just about mid, maybe a little bit to the side of the center, at the front, and then in the back, you put a little bit to the side of the center. Think about box subs too. In this case, you would want to go if you're going. It depends on how high your screen is. You might have to go sealed.
Sure.
In there,
but this is now an enclosed rectangle that is not gigantic in its interior dimensions.
The SB2000s would be, I think, okay in here.
Sure.
If you went with the
and
sealed box.
SB3000s would crush this room. So.
Right. So I think that SB2000s, you would be the pros. You would be looking at pushing them pretty hard to get this room fully pressurized, but
down at 20
it would be
hertz,
fine.
saying,
yeah, at 20 hertz. I think that they would live fine.
Oh yeah.
The 3000s would be absolutely no problem in this space. So consider that if what you're looking at is that front back placement,
sure.
And if that makes more sense to you. So he doesn't like having his side surround speakers right at seated ear level, but he also doesn't want them way high up. Is 4 feet off the ground reasonable? Dude, you throw them. I don't care where you put them.
I mean, again, we just say, look at the tweeter. Can the tweeter have a line of sight to all the seats that you care about? I mean, if you have a multitude of seats and you don't really care about a bunch of them, then don't even worry about those. Take the seats that you care about. Do you have a clear line of sight to the tweeter? And that is as high as you need. I mean, 4 feet off the ground.
My speakers were about 5 feet off the ground. Yeah. I'd be honest with you. Maybe not quite. Maybe 4.5 or something like that. And that's just because that's what worked for my room.
Yeah. You got to go reasonable. But I mean, 4 feet off the ground will probably be perfectly fine.
It's
rare that it isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So he positioned the side surrounds just behind the front row, so they are in front of the second row. He already pre-wired and put in DIY backer boxes for a second set of surrounds for the back row, but he hasn't bought any more speakers yet. Should he go for that second pair of side surrounds? And since he pre-wired back to where his Marantz SR 7010 and Outlaw Model 5000 will be, does he need to connect them in parallel? Can his Marantz handle that? You can connect them any way you want. I mean, you can do parallel or series.
You
but
can connect them in series, which is what I would do. First of all, should he do it? Should he go and buy another pair of side surround speakers?
Does anybody ever sit back there?
Yeah, how much do you care about the back row? That's really what answers it. Because I mean,
the people who sit back there, do they ever say, why does the surround come from behind? Kind of next to me or behind me? Why is it always coming from in front of me?
Because
like
it's going to be
else?
really rare that anybody is sitting there, and you're going to be sitting in the front for the vast majority of the time, and you're the one who cares. And hey, maybe with some people come over, you give them the prime location and you sit in the back, but it's only
that's what I do.
It's only for the occasions when that happens. Then hey, that's money you could save and put towards whatever, more movie rentals, more purchases. But if you care a lot about the back seats, then if you care a lot about them, then do it. That's what I say. And since it's already pre-wired, we actually mentioned this well, however many podcasts ago at this
Two
point.
podcasts. Well, it's the
Two question
the last,
and answer podcasts ago.
Yeah, not the last question and answer that we did this week, but the question we did before, right. the Q&A one we did before we talked about how to do series.
But all you would do is the red binding post out of your amplifier, whether it's from the Marantz or from the Outlaw Model 5000, the red binding post out into the red binding post of speaker 1, then the black binding post of your Marantz or your Model 5000 out to the black binding post of speaker 2, and then you take the black from speaker 1 and the red from speaker 2. And yes, those are all the way back at where your Marantz or your Outlaw is, but you're going to join them together with a butt splice. And now you have created a series circuit, and you're very, very safe. And your Marantz could drive that no problem. But the Model 5000 is a 5-channel amp. I don't see why it isn't powering your front 3 and your surrounds. But you're fine either way.
So he hasn't finished the floor yet, and they want in-floor heating. He doesn't want lose a ton of height for the room, though. It's only 7.5 feet tall, so I don't think you can lose any more feet space for the height. And he's read that he should do something soundproofing wise over the concrete foundation floor. What do we suggest? Well, I thought with the heated floor, don't they usually put that weird matte stuff down anyways?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly if this is radiant heat water based, you're gonna have the styrofoam puck thing that they put down anyway. But I bet he's not going for that because that takes up a significant amount of height. He's probably going for the electric. The electric in-floor heating, they can actually just scratch coat directly over the concrete if you really want to be inefficient. They would normally roll down some kind of insulation layer, and then they would put down a scratch coat, and then they would put the electrical on top of that, and then another scratch coat on top of that, and then they should put down some type of subfloor over that. If you simply put down the dimpled plastic that is meant for basements, and I'm assuming with a concrete foundation, this is his basement. You put down the dimpled plastic layer on that. You'd have a subfloor layer. You'd then have to have your scratch coat, your electrical, and then whatever topping they're going to put on that. Because you can put tile directly on top of the electrical in-floor heating. That's what they do a lot in bathrooms and kitchens and stuff. So you can.
I live in Florida. It's always hot here. We don't have in-floor nothing.
Right. But I think that's
if we could build our houses on ice cubes, we would.
I think that's the minimum height you can get away with while also addressing everything you would want to address, soundproofing and basement safety-wise. Because basements, you don't want stuff attached directly to the concrete. I hate that idea in any basement. In the basement, I want that dimpled plastic layer. It's not super
I feel like if they're going to do in-floor heating, no matter what they do, as long as they do it properly, it's gonna decouple. It's gonna be an insulator later between the heat source and the concrete.
That's right.
If not, all that heat just goes into that concrete and it's just gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
But I mean, they'll probably put down that dimple plastic layer anyway, but that's the one I would use because it allows for, if there is any moisture that wicks, it gives that somewhere to travel to get back out to your weeping. It gives you that little bit of sound isolation and thermal insulation that you're looking for. So just make sure they use the dimple plastic they were probably going to anyway.
So he wants a riser for the second row, but again, room height is at a premium. Then again, he doesn't want the riser so low that it's basically useless. So how high? And should he finish the whole floor first and then build the riser on top? Should he fully carpet and put the riser on top of that carpet? Or should the riser be built directly into the concrete foundation? Okay. You can solve this problem in a number of ways, and one of them involves buying different size couches, or couches with different size backs. So if you get a couch that's a little bit more low slung and doesn't have a huge amount of headrest area above it for the first row, and the second row is a little bit taller, and you've got a screen that's a little bit higher, your issues for seeing are kind of solved.
I think he already owns his seats though.
Okay, so that would be, if you really want a riser, what the minimum is. I can't imagine it's anything less than 6 inches, but it kind of depends on what the backs of the seats are in front of you and the sight lines. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. But just in general, though, I would finish every bit of this room before I would touch that riser.
Oh yeah, I would certainly. So I mean, clearly, if you're going to have a riser, it doesn't make much sense to have your electric in-floor heating going under the riser necessarily, if that's going to be the permanent installation. But if this is a riser that actually could theoretically be removed in the future, maybe you're going to move and sell this house, and not everybody's going to want a permanent riser built into this space.
I think that's a terrible idea to put a permanent riser in here.
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense to finish the whole floor. The riser is going to be something that theoretically maybe you could remove. And I mean, the way that I would build a riser that this is not something where it's like, I'm going to pick this up every weekend and take it out of here, but it's something that could be removed in the future with some labor. I would build the type of riser where it has a solid piece of plywood on the bottom, right? Not actually necessarily secured to the actual subfloor of the room, but a solid piece on the bottom, stands.
Sits on top of the carpet that's in the room.
That's right. Yeah. Your vertical joists with cross bracing. I'm going to put a plastic layer there and fill that whole bottom down with sand because I want this thing inert. I'm going to, above the sand layer, I'm going to put insulation, and then I'm going to have 2 layers of plywood on top. In your case, it's probably going to be an 8-inch riser because you're going to lose about 2 inches from your existing floor with this floor finishing. You're already at 7.5 feet. You put an 8-inch riser there, and now you're at the minimum ceiling height of 6'8". So that's where I would go. An 8-inch riser is fine. It's not so short that it's useless. And I would construct it that way so that, obviously with the sand and everything in there, it's going to be labor to take it out, but you could take it out and you have a fully finished floor underneath it.
Right. And what I would do is I would have the carpet guys come in and carpet. And then if you wanted to put carpet on top of this riser, then you have the riser basically in the room ready to go, all the materials. After they carpet, you put it in place exactly where you want it. Mm-hmm. And then you say, okay, now carpet this
now they
too.
Carpet that.
Yeah. And if they just carpet the top,
sure.
I think that would be fine. Or maybe just kind of wrap it around the sides. And then you could the bottom, if the sides are open like we normally suggest, then you could just put black speaker grill fabric on that or something like that to mask that off. So should he make the riser into a bass trap or resonator like jeans? Those are 2 separate things. So yes, you could make it into a bass trap, and B, very much do not make it into a resonator like jeans.
Don't make it into a resonator. I mean,
it's just awful.
I know we've talked about quite a few times about making the riser into a bass trap, but I'm like, I don't know. It seems like such a hassle. I just want it inert. That's all I really want my riser to be is inert.
So if you just leave the sides open and there's some insulation in there, it is in essence trapping.
But the air has to be able to get through the whole thing to really be a bass trap.
Well, right, yeah, and it's a bit of a hassle. So I would, if it makes you feel any better, if you leave the sides open and have insulation in there, I'm calling it a bass trap. Does that make you feel better? I call it a bass trap. It's not trapping a lot.
Yep.
But it certainly isn't doing nothing.
Yep. So I just wanted it inert.
But God, please do not make it resonate.
Yes, that is awful.
So awful. I just hate it. So should he get an Epson 5040 UB or a 5050 UB? 5050 is a bigger number, so that one's the better one.
It is. I mean, the big feature, so there's 2 features of the 5050 UB that would be convincing for you. A, do you want to be able to play 4K in HDR at 60 frames a second? That is mostly going to apply to games. It also applies to 2 movies now, right? Ang Lee's
2.
Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, and Gemini Man, because they're both 4K HDR at 60 frames a second.
I can't figure out which one of those movies I want to see least. I think it's the Long Walk one, because it sounds like somebody walking.
No, that actually is the better movie as far as movies go. Gemini Man is certainly more of the spectacular. But in any case, those 2 movies and video games are really what you're caring about, because the 5040 UB cannot do 4K at 60 frames per second with HDR. It can do 4K at 60 frames a second, no HDR. It can do 4K with HDR, but only at 24 or 30 frames a second. That's the limit of the 5040 UB. Now, the other feature is the 5050 UB is better at HDR. Automatically,
that's what I would care about, honestly.
Yeah, automatically, its tone mapping is already a bit better, but they also give you a 16-point slider so that if you find the overall image too dim or too bright, you can manually very easily control that, and the 5040 UB does not have that control in it. Now, it's a significant price difference at this point. If you don't care about 4K 60 HDR at all, then that price difference, I mean, the 5040
What's
UB...
the price difference?
Oh, I mean, at the moment, it's like $1,000.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That ain't nothing. So
that's a lot.
I'm sure that's why he's
it's
asking.
Like $1,700 instead of $2,700. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess.
I mean, you should be able to take those 2 factors and decide if that's worth the $1,000 difference to you.
How much better is the HDR? Is it a lot?
Mm,
Is it $1,000 better?
no.
Because if it's not
I'm gonna
$1,000
I'm
better,
gonna
I think I'm going
unequivocally
to go
say
with
that it's
50.
not $1,000 better.
Okay, then my recommendation is the 5040.
Okay.
So, is his Marantz SR7010 ready for all the modern video signals, or does he need it to consider a new receiver? Ooh, 7010. That's quite a few years old now, isn't
But that's
it?
the one I have. It's ready. It's fine.
Yeah,
It won't pass through auto low latency mode from your Xbox One to your new display. But you know what? Neither of these Epsons does auto low latency mode anyway, so that's not a problem. It'll pass through Dolby
okay.
Vision. It'll pass through HDR10. It'll pass through HLG. You're good to go.
That's one that we really lucked out on the receiver end with these new audio formats and
Mm.
the high dynamic range and all that stuff, is that it just passes through without us having to get new HDMI chips. I'm sure HDMI is very upset about it, but it works. All right, we got a half an hour, Rob, and I'm
I
done.
know.
Alan is moving to his new Florida house. Sorry, it's very hot here. Don't come here. There's too many people. They're just everywhere. And they say they come here to die, but then they don't. And they just keep driving in the wrong lane with their blinker on. Okay. Alan is moving to his new Florida house, everything wide open, about 1,600 square feet. We convinced him that trying to make Atmos happen in his central gathering room is an uphill battle. And that was my face. I made a face. You can't hear
Mm-hmm.
it, but I made a face. And since he has no good place to put his surrounds, one side is full of sliding glass doors, and the other is an open hallway and a half-height wall, and the back is open to the kitchen. He's agreed that in-ceiling surrounds and no other in-ceiling speakers make sense. So there'll be 5.2.
Yep.
I could argue out of the two. I could 5.1 in an open like this. How about
I
5.1?
still like two subs no matter where you are. Two subs is better.
Okay. So looking at the layout here, the TV will be on the wall. The couch will be in the middle of a gathering room. To the left, there's a sliding door. To the right, there's a hallway, and behind it is the kitchen and breakfast nook. In front to the left is a door to the master bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small hallway, and who knows what else. It's everywhere. So he's got a Denon X4000, which is I love it. It's a good receiver, which can power 5.2 just fine. That is true. But he would also like to have two other pairs of speakers in other parts of the house, and we'd like to be able to play whatever he is watching on the main 5.2 system from those to those other two pairs of speakers. His X4000 won't send any HDMI sources to Zone 2, and it doesn't do all the latest video formats, so he's considering a receiver upgrade. He won't be buying that until summer, so is there something for him to consider that will let him accomplish what he wants without being a flagship model or forcing him to do everything wirelessly, since everything is already being pre-wired? Yeah, don't all the newer ones do HDMI to Zone 2?
The X3600H, even though now that is a 9 amplifier receiver, you don't need it for your main room, but the whole idea is you wanted to be able to take the source that's playing from HDMI, keep it in surround sound in your main gathering room, but then play it out of the two others. Well, that's what the X3600H can do now. It can down convert whatever is playing in surround sound in the main room and output via Zone 2 a down mixed 2-channel stereo version of it. Now,
Yamaha can do this too, though,
Yamaha
right?
can do that too. So you could look at now it wouldn't have to be their flagship. It could be one step down from the flagship.
Saving money.
The RXA 2080 at the moment. I'm sure there's a 2090 coming this year, but the RXA 2080 at the moment could also do this. And both of those would also, if you want to add more in the future, and it would be most convenient to do it wirelessly, it would be Hios for the Denon, and as we discussed with Phil Jones, it can do that. It can take that same 2-channel down mix and do it via Hios. In the case of Yamaha, they have been able to do this for years with MusicCast and have a down mix 2-channel version played via MusicCast. So two great options there, but you do have to make sure if you're going with Denon that it is the 3600H and essentially nothing else right this minute that can do that.
Right. Between now and then, though, ask us again.
I'm sure there'll be a 4600H that comes out and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But yeah.
So you can put up a few printed acoustic panels and put a rug in front of his seats, but he won't be anywhere close to covering 30% of his surface area in absorption. Will Odyssey XT32 or a highest level of YPOW help at all? Functionally, I'm going to say no, but objectively, they will help. But I don't know that you will experience what I would call a night and day difference between not having them on.
I mean, there's only so much that you can electronically do to the signal before it leaves your speakers,
right,
compared to what happens after the sound leaves your speakers and bounces around your room. There's only so much an electronic signal can do.
It's just immaterial, though, because you're going to end up with XC32 with this Denon.
Or the highest level of YPOW, either way.
Or the highest level of YPOW because of what you want to do with your sending the audio around your house.
We're certainly going to say go ahead and run it. Absolutely, we're going to say go ahead and run it.
One thing that one of the things I like about Odyssey and YPOW is, regardless of the haters online, very rarely do I realistically think that people have a negative experience with them. It will default to doing nothing,
right?
rather than doing something for the sake of doing it. And that's
if you put
why
it in the mic in the multiple positions and it's like one is up, one is down, one is up, one is down, it's going to be like, well, you get what you get, and that's actually the best thing that it could possibly do in that scenario. Yeah.
So with this wide open space, but only about 9 feet distance from his seats to his TV, does he absolutely need tower front speakers? Should he go with a standard RBH bookshelves or something else? You're only sitting 9 feet away. You absolutely do not need tower speakers.
The only part where we're concerned is that mid-bass region, right in that crossover region where both the speaker and the subwoofers are both playing, and that is still below the transition frequency of your room. So we don't want like anemic output in that 160 hertz range, which the speakers are definitely still playing. But no, I don't think you need, like, you definitely don't need tower speakers here. And for the upper, the mid-range and the treble, sitting 9 feet away, you don't need crazy high output.
I very much wish I didn't have tower speakers. I would love some speaker manufacturer to tell me, we would like to sponsor an AV Rant, theater. Yes, give me some bookshelves. Oh, we've got these great big towers. No, I don't want towers. I want bookshelves. Oh my God, there's so rarely any cause for towers in most people's lives. They look good. That's about it.
So whatever. I mean, both Ascend and RBH, their bookshelf speakers can handle oodles of power, and great choices, both of them. I would also throw, in these types of rooms, I do often like HSU's HB1 Mark II speakers. I think they work really well in rooms like this, and they're nice and efficient. So
and they're ugly.
If you want to play it loud in the kitchen, they're able to do that.
Yeah.
So I would throw that onto the list. You can't go wrong with any of those. SVS too, right? You can't go wrong with SVS's bookshelf speakers here. Then they can handle oodles of power.
Yeah. Just almost anything that we normally recommend, you would be fine with. All right, Andrew. Andrew wants to make his own acoustic panels, and since he's a huge Star Wars fan, he was considering making panels that look like the interior of the Death Star. Dun, 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 dun. He's seen panels from GIC that have their scatter plate on top of the absorption, so he could do a similar thing, but just make the scatter plate pattern look like the Death Star walls. Okay, so the scatter plate is usually, I mean, I don't know exactly that GIC did this, but I'm sure they did. It's mathematically derived to scatter to bounce the sound in as many different directions as possible, so that you're not getting that directional bounce. Can you do that? I really don't think it matters. I mean, I think that I think that being so worried about being mathematically perfect versus just, I mean, this is an aesthetic choice.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, you have two options here in my mind. You could do the thing that you're talking about, which sounds very difficult, or you could just send the pattern to GIC and say, print me panels that look like this, and then do that.
But this is Andrew, the guy who makes the models that we're talking about.
Yes.
We know he is handy, and we know he is precise, and we know he's very good at what he does. And I don't doubt for a second that he can make these. Now, the image that he sent of the type of pattern that he's wanting to use, this is not something where it's going to block all the absorption or something. There's plenty of opening.
So he's talking about the dark and the light. He's doing both of them,
I'm not sure. I mean, certainly the light section, I mean, that's going to be what would be scatter plate-ish, right? So you'd have absorption behind, in this image where he's got, light coming through these patterns that were part of the interior of the Death Star. So, I mean, I have no problem with that. Is it going to be a completely mathematically derived scatter plate? No, but that is what you're looking at there is totally fine. I say go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Even the black, I guess you're going to make those floor to ceiling areas right there. You
Mm-hmm.
could just basically, put lights behind the other parts, and then or white panels,
Yeah.
flush up against that, and then if you're building a wood frame around this, so it looks like that shape,
Mm-hmm.
because it's basically like black on gray.
Yeah.
You just put gray panels
Yeah, you can just
behind
have
everything
gray
else.
fabric panels. You could print that image onto the gray fabric panels, and it would look like it.
Well, if he's trying to go floor to ceiling, he might not be able to do that. In
Mm.
which case, what you really want to do here is you want to have is you don't need to get panels. What you need is to make this, which would be a frame that would sit. It's basically a false wall
Hmm.
that would come off, and then behind the parts that you want to be light, you either put lights or you put white fabric there,
Mm-hmm.
and then behind the parts that you want to be gray, you put gray, and you paint everything else black. The
Sure.
frame itself is all black, and then behind that, because it's acoustically transparent fabric, you could put panels or just raw insulation wherever the
Mm.
heck you want it to be, or everywhere,
Yep.
which would also be nice. So I don't know how complex you're going to get with it, but I think it's fine.
Oh yeah.
So since he wants it to look really nice, he'd want to use MDF to make the panel frames and scatter plates. Any reason to avoid that choice of material? Nope.
I mean,
It's expensive,
cost.
and when you
Exactly.
cut it,
That's the only.
it's expensive, and when you cut it whatever they say, don't breathe that stuff.
Sure.
That's about it.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah.
the reason they don't use it for the frames that say Geek makes is just because it costs more. That is really the only reason. As long as you're willing to bear the cost, it's a perfect acoustically. It's a wonderful material. So yeah.
Yeah, but you could literally use anything. This is not
Pretty
going to be I mean, the frames themselves, they're just frames. They're not, you're just making a covering or whatever. It's, the fact that it's MDF and it's more inert than, plywood. This is not a concern.
Yeah, it's not a
in
sound
this case.
producing item. It's not a
Yeah,
speaker.
yeah.
No.
I would not worry about it. I'd use the whatever was cheapest and fit the bill. Patricio wants to upgrade to 4K HDR with a projector. He's not a gamer, so 5040. So the lowest latency and highest frame rates are not a concern to him. He just wants to watch movies. He's seen that the 5040 can still be found in some places, including occasional refurb units directly from Epson, and those are much less expensive than a new 5050. So since he isn't a gamer, the 5040 being limited to 4K HDR 24 or 30 hertz is probably okay, right? Is there any benefit? We've already answered this question.
Yep.
Other than 4K HDR at 60 offered by the 5050, that would make it worth the price difference. And the difference is the HDR is a little better. You get the little slider.
That's right.
But is it $1,000 better?
No, it is
Rob?
not. No, I don't think it is $1,000 better. Yeah, unless you absolutely care about those two Ang Lee movies and those are the top priority to you, I think you are a very good candidate for a 5040 UB.
So the Epson 4010 is newer. Is the 5040 UB still better, even though it's older?
Yes, it is. It's considerably better. The 4010 is not an ultra black. It is not a UB. It is definitely noticeable to pretty much anybody, other than if it was completely washed out in both cases. So no, yeah, the 5040 UB is better than the 4010, no question.
Are there any limitations of the wireless 5040 BE versus the regular wired 5040 UB? Why do you want wireless? Do you need wireless?
I mean, it's convenient if you haven't run a long HDMI cable, and that's what you're going to have to do. But the wireless version of this, it needs line of sight. It is not something that if you were thinking maybe I'm going to put something in a closet and beam it wirelessly and not have to run a wire, absolutely not. This is a line of sight system only. It is 32 feet max, and that is if you put the transmitter right in front of the projector. There is an arc that goes what the range is, where the minimum of that arc is down at 16 feet if you're like quite far down or above or whatever the projector. So the transmitter has to face the projector. So this is really only, I have all my equipment at the front of my room and the transmitter is going to be at the front of my room and facing the projector. That is the only way this works. You can't put the transmitter behind or to the side or anything else. Got to be in front. And for some strange reason, with 4K resolution, it is always 30 hertz. It is never 24. It is never 60. It is always 30. So those are restrictions where I'm like, it costs at least $100 more. It's usually $200 more for the wireless one. I'm like, that'll buy a whatever HDMI cable you need.
So am I reading this right? The 5040 UB 3 LCD projector with 4K enhancement HDR refurb at Epson.com is $1151.
I have seen it at, I saw it at 1200. I guess it's down a little bit more than that.
That's crazy.
I know. You gotta want that
like,
60 hertz bad, for 2700.
Dude, I would jump on that. Yeah. So whatever. We already answered this, so we're done. Yeah. All right, John. 18 minutes. John wants to tell us about more about the setup where he's using a Denon X2200W with his new Paradigm speakers. This is the setup where he previously used Klipsch towers, but he was able to overheat his receiver when they crank up the 2-channel music. We speculate it must have been running the speaker full range for 2-channel listening, and or those receivers didn't have good ventilation. Neither of those things were true. Ooh, he's got the same rack as me. He always used a subwoofer and set his speakers to small with an 80 hertz crossover. The receiver is in an equipment rack that's open on all sides. He put a couple of fans on top of his Denon, and it no longer shuts down, but it still gets hot. I have that exact same one, and you have more clearance around your receiver than I have.
There you go.
Right now. And so, listener James W. heard of this and wanted to remind us that AV receiver overheating is often due to video processing rather than the amplifier. So make sure video conversion and scaling are both turned off. That's a good reminder. Yeah. I forgot about that. But since John's overheating was only happening during 2-channel music playback, it seems a bit unlikely the video processing was to blame. In any case, it will hopefully all be taken care of now that he's bought a monolith amplifier. He needs a new receiver that has pre-outs, though, so he's strongly considering the Denon X3600H. It has all the latest features and at a great price, but Phil Jones did mention that there's maybe a 30% parts difference between the Denon and the Marantz, and that's enough to make a big difference. So is that enough to make a big difference in sound quality? Some people claim Marantz is better for music. Is that all BS? The last part is true. That is all BS.
Yeah, the last part.
How is a receiver better for music? How?
I always say, this one's better for sound, but not for sound.
Yeah. I love it. Speakers. These are good speakers for music, but not also for the music that comes in movies.
That's right. Or these are good for movies, but not for music. Okay, they're good for sound, but not for sound.
Okay. Yeah. 30% parts difference. Hey, I'm absolutely certain that there is a 30% parts difference.
I know they have different.
And I'm absolutely certain
different preamplifier sections. That is for sure. That is absolutely the case. Different preamplifier sections are.
I don't see that now. I think that sonically you're not going to hear a difference between the two of them. No. As long as you're not clipping anything, you're going to be fine.
I love the X3600H. I think it's a wonderful model. So yes, by all means.
Yeah. So what's the new auto low latency feature mentioned in the Denon X3600H? Will it impact his Xbox One gaming? I mean, what projector is he looking at? Or does he have a projector? Or what is he?
I'm not sure.
Because it's got to be all the way through.
It's got to be all the way through. Yeah, your TV also has to have auto low latency. So yes, this is absolutely a gaming feature. The PlayStation 4 doesn't have this. This is only on the Xbox One right now. Both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox One Series X. I can't believe I'm saying that name. That they will have this. So this is a thing where.
But what did you say? Series X.
What? The Xbox One Series X. That's the thing that's going to go head to head with the PlayStation 5.
They just added another X to the Xbox.
Remember that? We talked
about
that at our.
I blocked it out. I know you did.
Yes,
I'm blocking out the X's.
Series X is the name of the next Xbox.
Well, that's 3 X's. You know what 3 X's means?
I know. It's also Series X, which you can shorten to SE capital X. That's what they want to do, but that's what it is. So anyway, those will have it. So yeah, the whole idea is you start a game and it sends out a little flag and it automatically kicks your compatible television into game mode. So you have the lowest latency possible. And many AV receivers until today have not been able to pass through that little flag. That little flag gets lost when you try to send it through an AV receiver. So the newest AV receivers, like the X3600H, specifically mention, hey, that flag is going to get through this AV receiver. So go ahead and plug your game system into the AV receiver and then plug it into your compatible television, and the signal will make it from game system to TV. That's all that is.
So we mentioned how his Paradigm speakers can handle oodles of power. He went for a multi-channel monolith amp since the price per channel gets lower the more channels you buy.
Yup, that's how they get you. It's $1,000 for the first 2, but then it's only like $150 more each extra one. Keep piling them in there.
I'm sorry. Dude, I am so not laughing at you. I am 100% laughing at the logic that I absolutely followed when I started shopping for
That's
a
right.
2-channel amplifier for my overhead speakers when I wanted to add 2 more channels so I could get the full
Mm-hmm.
7.2.4 Dolby Atmos in here. And I started off with a $100 Dayton audio amp, and I ended up looking at a
That's
7-channel
right.
monolith
$1,500
amplifier, and I was like,
or $1,600 now.
how did I get from $100 for 2 channels to everything being powered by this stupid, what am I doing? So yes, I
Oh
understand
yeah,
how you got to this place. It is a very ridiculous place, but
it's not hard to
you're
do.
there. So you go. So should he buy amp his Paradigm Towers? You can. It's not going to make sonically any difference
Yeah, because
whatsoever.
I mean, the tweeter draws
Yeah.
hardly any power, and that's what's now getting an amplifier all to itself.
All to itself. It's drawing it's
Yeah.
0.01 of a watt.
Oh, hey, full reference volume, it might be upwards of 2.5 watts, Tom. It might be.
2.5 watts.
It might be.
Hey, well, at least you have $300 of worth of amplifiers to power
right.
those two.
Yeah, no, there's not really much reason. But I mean, hey, if those amps are going to go unused otherwise, then hey, knock yourself out. It all goes through the same crossover anyway. It's not like there's an outboard active crossover with the Paradigm speakers. So all the power that tweeter is not using from that one amplifier channel that is now dedicated to powering the tweeter, it all just gets turned into heat.
Oh, heat.
Yeah.
We know how much we love that in the system. Cody asks, why do we often mention that SVS subs will never break themselves? How did they accomplish this? And is this different from other brands such as HSU, Rhythmic, or Monoprice Monolith? So, how can a receiver or a speaker or an amplifier, which is what a subwoofer is a speaker and an amplifier in one box, how can they break themselves? One of the ways that you can do that is by asking it to play so loud that it draws so much amplifier power and heat that the internal mechanism, the pole, the wires that create the electromagnet inside that
the
make the driver
coil
go in and out, that stuff gets so hot it melts or distorts, or it can actually not come out, but basically get out of alignment.
Jumps the magnetic gap, as they would say.
Right. So that's one way that can happen. Now, you can also break it on the amplifier side as well. So the amplifier itself can be driven so hard that it essentially, breaks.
And
the capacitors.
The driver could also try to move so much that it does what we call bottoming out, which is typically that it moves back so far in the chamber that the voice coil on the back of the woofer physically knocks into the magnet behind it. That is bottoming out, and it makes a literal clang clang sound, and it's horrible and scary.
Right. So SBS has put in their subwoofers mechanisms that, and then you see this in other subwoofers
digital
as well.
Signal processing. Yeah, the signal that comes into an SVS subwoofer always 100% of the time is converted into a digital signal and sent through a processor. And what they're able to do is analyze that signal, very, very quickly. It's pretty high-powered DSP chips that they've got in there now. And they know what the limit is, what the safe limit is. And basically, if the signal coming into the sub is ever requesting greater than the safe level of the signal, well, they use that signal processing to just limit it off. They just roll it off so that the signal never actually goes above the safe limit. And that's why it's nigh impossible for an SVS sub to ever damage itself, because right in the signal itself, before that signal is ever amplified and sent to the voice coil to drive the woofer, it's already been curtailed to the safe level that is programmed into that digital signal processor. Now, Monoprice Monolith does exactly the same thing. They also use DSP protection. They are every bit as safe as SVS is. HSU and Rhythmic, they aren't using DSP. HSU is using Bash amplifiers, regular Class D amplifiers. Those have regular filters built into them, not digital signal processing filters, but regular analog filters built into them that make them very, very difficult to overdrive. Theoretically, it's still possible, but it's extremely unlikely. Rhythmic is using a servo, and the servo itself can become saturated if you send a ridiculous enough signal to
Right.
it.
Servo subs. That's one of the they used to always brag about
Yeah.
servo subs, and that's what they do. They that it is a protection mechanism within them to keep them from killing themselves, but it's not foolproof.
And it is possible
foolproof
to damage the servo itself. I mean, if you're going ridiculous. And then power sound audio, they're using ice block amplifiers, which are essentially just as safe as what SVS and Monoprice are using. So, I mean, all of these are really quite safe, but there is the theoretical chance in the case of HSU and Rhythmic that it is still on an outside chance possible to overdrive them, whereas the Monolith and the SVS with their DSP processing, it's nigh impossible.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we like them. But honestly, if you follow our recommendations, and we often recommend Rhythmic subs and Paradigm subs and other subs, HSU subs all the time. And we're power sound audio as well.
I mean, mainly why I like the DSP and SVS and Monolith is because not only are they using it for protection, but also they will make it so that as you keep increasing the volume dial, the output of the subwoofer remains linear. They don't just let the sub react to the electrical signal in a non-linear fashion. And with the other ones, that is possible. Now, Rhythmic, that's exactly what the servo there is to counteract non-linearity. So different methods of trying to accomplish the same things, really. But the DSP does it really well.
The thing here, though, is we recommend these other subs all the time because we're recommending them an appropriate size sub for the room that they're going to be in. So when somebody says, I've bought a sub and it's in this room, and we say it's too small, what we're saying is you'll never get it. It will not pressurize the room. And what we're not usually saying, because it's normally SVS, but what what we're not saying is if you try, you might damage your sub. And when somebody comes to us and says, I've got this size room, what sub should I buy? We say you can buy SVS, or you can buy Rhythmic, or you can buy Monoprice, or you can buy Power Sound Audio, and these are your options. And it doesn't matter that they have protection mechanisms in place on all of these subs or not, because you'll never. As long as you're just setting it up for the way we tell you to and playing it up to reference volume and not much past it, you're never going to get to the point where you're going to be damaging that sub. So, it's not something that I would ever worry about as long as you're, putting the appropriate sub in the appropriate room. You damage speakers when you're in the college and you take your speaker and you put it in your window and you crank it up as high as you can and, and play rap music for 6 straight hours. Yes, that is how you damage it. The other way I've seen speakers damaged is by placing a small speaker very far away from you in a well-dampened room and trying to hit reference volume. You will damage the speaker that way. Last question, Steve. Steve would like to better understand how the bit rate of a given video affects what we actually see. He knows that at the moment, physical discs still offer the highest bit rate. All the streaming services use lower bit rates than physical discs, correct?
Yes. At this time, yes.
At this time, yes. But how does that difference actually manifest in terms of the viewing experience? He's heard that lower bit rates could create macro blocking, but what is that exactly? But this man has to have a great internet connection. He's heard that dark scenes or scenes with smoke or lots of small particles are usually the most obvious, but do you basically need to put the disc version and the streaming version side by side in order to know the differences? Basically, can ignorance be bliss in this case? He doesn't want an obvious loss in its quality, but there's no denying the convenience of streaming or getting your movies and TV shows through, say, iTunes or Vudu. What's the real situation when it comes to video bit rates? So to me, the most obvious place that you see the difference in video bit rates, other than when your internet starts to lag because everybody went online to check Facebook at the same time, is when a movie first starts and you get that the black screen and then up comes like Paramount or whatever, and it's a light. It's a light thing that's getting the black around it is starting to get lighter. Then you'll see these sort of, it looks like waves, and that's what I would call macro blocking.
That isn't really macro blocking. That's posterization or color banding at that point. Macro blocking really does look like blocks inside. And
So
it goes back to, I mean, what we're really talking about is compression. That's what we're really talking about.
yes.
Because the way compression works is the video signal is analyzed by the compression codec. And it says, well, what parts of this image changed from this frame to this frame? And they usually pick a key frame. They're like, here's our key frame. We're going to reference everything to that for the next little while. And then at some interval, we'll pick a new key frame and go from there. But they basically say, look at this key frame now. In every subsequent frame after that key frame, what changed? Because anything that didn't change, let's just leave it the same. Let's capture that once as a still image and then never re-encode it again, only the parts of the image that change. And there was actually a really cool video on YouTube where a guy took one YouTube video upload, downloaded his own YouTube video, re-uploaded it to YouTube, downloaded that new one, and did it over and over and over and over again to show what the compression is doing, because it's trying to recompress every single time. And like eventually his face just turned into like one uniform pink blob, and that was all that was left. And so that is an extreme version of macro blocking, because what it's literally doing is drawing little block shapes and saying, well, everything in this block stayed the same from frame to frame. So I'm only going to encode that once and keep it the same until something changes. Now, going all the way back to MPEG-2, it was literal squares. That's why it was macro blocking. As we move to H.264 and H.265 and H.266, they're able to draw different shapes. H.266 can basically draw curves now. So it can draw right around a shape and then like keep everything outside of that shape, you know, static. So it's getting better and better, but it requires more and more processing power. So as we have more data to work with, well, we can more frequently change. We can have more frequent keyframes, or we can more frequently change or more frequently update. That's what
I can't believe that this dude's never had a compression, a bit rate dip in his internet where he's seen it go from crisp to blurry, because that's it.
Yeah,
man.
and that never happens with a disc. Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Yeah, that's never happens with a disc, but you will happen when you're streaming video, and that's, you know, as that bit rate dips, you're gonna, you know, the ability to give you a sharper image is, you know, the first thing that goes there.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing is, our internet bandwidth is getting better. You know,
it still happens to me at least a couple of times. I will say a week.
Yeah, but
now.
what I'm
It used to
saying
be a
is
couple times a day.
I don't think it's going to be a case where as we go, you know, further into the future, that this is going to get worse for streaming. Streaming is only going to continue to get better, and we likely aren't going to have another disc format after Ultra HD Blu-ray. It seems kind of unlikely that there's really going to be another one, although they might use something like the new VVC codec to cram even more data into existing Ultra HD Blu-ray, or you can make them into 4-layer discs instead of 3, right? That's the type of thing we might do with Ultra HD Blu-ray. But yeah, I mean, how does it manifest itself? Yeah, you can sometimes see it actually break down into blocks. You might see the color banding, because what it's doing there is saying, well, these two colors next to each other, they're close enough that I'm going to save some data here and just call them the same color, and you end up with a block of color instead of a nice smooth gradation. That's another way that they save bandwidth. So yeah, there are these small differences in the image. If you aren't noticing it, then ignorance kind of is bliss, honestly. And it's not going to be a case where it's going to get worse over time. So I don't have a problem with somebody going, you know what, instead of buying physical discs, I'm going to just, the movies I want to own, I'm going to buy them on iTunes. Because you know what else iTunes has done is free upgrades. You bought a 1080p version, they give you the 4K version now that it's available for free. I'm like, well, you didn't get that with a disc, did you? So
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I feel like, and this is just me, and I don't expect anybody else to feel this way. I feel like I no longer buy discs because I want to own them. I buy discs because I want to send a message to the studios, or to make more of the stuff. Same thing with going to the movies. I go to the movies to say I want to see more movies like this.
That's a bit like buying the vinyl to support your favorite band, because that's where they make the most money other than touring.
Yeah, that's true. So, you know, but I'm not buying the vinyl because I don't have a vinyl player, but whatever. All right, let's end it here. We've got 2 additional people on this, but we should have knocked down our list enough so that we are now more reasonable.
Well, and you know what? Lee and I might be around tomorrow to knock this list down even further, because this is not the entire list. I didn't get everything onto this list. So we'll get caught up, hook or by crook.
I don't need 3 podcasts this week.
Oh, I think we do, Tom. We missed 3 weeks.
People do not want 3 podcasts.
Oh, I think they do, Tom.
They do not. No more podcasts, Rob. Take a break.
I don't know about that.
All right, want to thank Andrew for being our listener of the beginning of the year
Yes.
and providing our model, the A model, to our prize winner from our Patreon support turn toast.
That's right.
So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and congratulations, Turn Toast. You'll have something as nice looking as this X-Wing model that he made.
We never talked about the new Star Wars movie, did we?
Nope.
Next week.
Okay.
Next week, spoiler-filled reviews, maybe.
That seems fair.
Maybe.
There's been enough time. Everybody's seen it who wants to see it at this point.
I think so. Most people just want to hate on it, but let's go. All right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.